You ever have one of those days where a single envelope, just a plain old piece of mail, flips your whole world upside down? I did. I was expecting maybe a water bill or some coupon I'd toss,
This deed
but
secures our
instead,
position.
staring up at
What are
me
the
in big
contingencies?
bold
The
letters
timeline is
was a
aggressive.
notice that
We
my
move now.
grandfather's cottage, my last tie to him, my summer sanctuary, was about to be demolished. I'm talking the real deal, official letterhead threatening words. Demolition, of all things. You want to talk about your stomach dropping clean through
Afternoon,
your shoes?
young man. Fishing
That place
today?
at
Yes, sir, but
1478
nothing's
Lakeview Drive
biting.
wasn't just
Patience
a
is
house.
key. You'll get
It
one.
was the core memory machine, pine paneling, stone fireplace, fish stories, and all the echoes of a granddad who could fix anything except, I guess, the march of so-called progress. I'd inherited it 3 years back, kept it up best I could. I mean, it's old, sure, but strong, like the man who built it. My name's Gabriel Morrison, Gabe for short. 34, working as a structural engineer in Chicago, the kind of guy who double-checks everything and rarely gets rattled. But that letter, that had me mad enough to forget my own advice. I dialed the HOA number so fast I barely remembered to breathe. Shoreline Heights Homeowners Association. This is Patricia. How may I help you? The voice was pure customer service. Syrupy but cold underneath. I told her about the demolition notice. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, you must be Mr. Morrison. We've tried to reach you about your violations. Like it was my fault I hadn't been reading the smoke signals. She started rattling off nonsense about updated community aesthetics, my rustic siding, my non-regulation dock, my color palette, apparently a crime against modern sensibility. And landscaping, oh, the horror. I kept my voice steady, but inside I was boiling. She threw in some line about how all properties are automatically subject to the HOA now, thanks to some community charter I never signed and never even saw. By the time she finished, I knew one thing. This was no accident. I took off work the next day, pointed my car north, and tried to outrun my anger on that 3-hour drive to Lake Geneva. The signs for Shoreline Heights. A premier lake community hit differently when you realize your own front door is on the line. The cottage itself looked the same, gray cedar big deck, that hand-built dock stretching out into the sun like Grandpa waving hello. But stapled right there to the door was an orange notice so bright it felt like a warning flare. Inside, everything was just as I left it, from the threadbare couch to the photos on the walls. But I couldn't shake the feeling that a piece of my world was about to get bulldozed in the name of someone else's vision. I decided I needed answers face to face, so I went straight to the HOA office, which of course looked like some kind of modern art museum. I walked in and was greeted by Pamela Blonde Bob, polished her smile so tight it could snap. But the real star was Karen Whitfield, the president herself, straight out of Central Casting, mid-50s, highlight perfect hair blazer with a gold pin and eyes that never quite smiled. She led me into a glassy conference room overlooking the lake. Mr. Morrison, your property has multiple violations. The exterior's deteriorating, the color's wrong, and your dock fails our safety specs. I told her flat out that I was a structural engineer. That cottage was solid. She just blinked at me. Our architectural committee disagrees. Plus, your property detracts from the community's aesthetics and values. Now, I'm not one to raise my voice, but I could hear it shaking as I told her my family's story, how Grandpa built that place in '56 before anyone had even heard the word HOA. She handed me a fat packet of bylaws and said, once 75% of property owners voted, everyone is subject. Never mind that I'd never even heard of the vote. She slid papers my way. All business told me if I didn't comply, they'd fine me $500 a day, then demolish. I left with the bylaws clutched in my fist, fury in my gut. That night I combed through the paperwork, looked real enough, but something just felt wrong. The next morning I drove to the county records office where Dorothy, a clerk old enough to remember my grandfather, pulled out the original deed from '56. 5 acres, nearly 300 feet of lakefront. The map in the HOA packet, barely 1 acre, a tiny sliver. It was like someone had cut up my family's history with a pair of scissors. Dorothy confirmed there'd never been any legal redrawing of the lines. She printed every document I needed and, bless her heart, pointed me to the land just south owned by the HOA, now bought last year. Suddenly the pieces clicked. The fancy new beach club they built was sitting smack dab on my land. This was bigger than a cottage. I called up Patrick, an old buddy who's a land surveyor. Pat, you ever want to expose some corporate shenanigans? Now's your chance. He came out, and by sundown we'd measured every inch, every boundary marker Grandpa ever set. He pointed at the new beach club, grinned, and said, "About a third of that's yours, Gabe." I felt a surge, anger, sure, but also a sliver of hope. Maybe I could fight this. Back in Chicago, I called Olivia Chen, lawyer, college friend, smart as they come. She didn't mince words. You've got them, Gabe. At minimum, trespassing and illegal construction. That demolition threat, hot air. Not legal, not by a mile. She sent a cease and desist letter the next day. And then for a hot minute, I thought the story would slow down, lawyers trading letters, everyone cooling off. Nope. That very night, Karen Whitfield herself called Voice Pure Ice, insisting her team vetted all boundaries and that my grandfather's land had been subdivided years ago. Problem was, the county had no record. I warned her set one toe on my property and I'd call the sheriff. The days crawled. Olivia did some digging, and here comes the twist, turned up emails between Karen and the developer. They knew they were over the line. Knew it banked on me being an absentee owner and figured if they bullied hard enough, I'd fold. Olivia filed for an emergency injunction. I thought we'd at least get to the hearing, but life doesn't work that way. Next morning, I get a call from Harold, my neighbor Gabe. Get up here now. There's bulldozers at your place. I nearly dropped the phone. I called Olivia, hopped the first train north, praying I'd make it before they could do any real damage. But it was already too late. I pulled onto Lakeview Drive and saw what no grandkid should ever have to see, my grandfather's life's work. My childhood smashed to splinters. Yellow excavator debris everywhere. And there was Karen standing next to a man in a hard hat, like she was breaking ground for something noble. I lost it. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled. She tried to stay calm, told me they'd followed all procedures. I pulled out my phone, started recording, threatened to call the sheriff, which, as it turned out, was already on the way. Deputy Ramirez arrived, took one look at the scene, and said, "HOA bylaws don't override state property law." "Where's your court order?" Karen blustered. But by then her hands were shaking. He shut down the demolition crew and told everyone to clear out. While they packed up, Harold came over and handed me his phone. He'd filmed the whole thing from the first bulldozer to the last splinter. I could have hugged him. That night, as I crashed on his couch, Olivia called. She was furious, but also determined. "We're filing for damages, criminal charges, the works." The emergency hearing came fast. The judge, Patricia Hernandez, listened to Olivia lay it all out, survey county records, Harold's videos. The HOA's lawyer tried to bluff with talk of some ancient subdivision, but when pressed, couldn't produce a single document. The judge shut it down. She granted an injunction, halted all action on my land, and referred the matter to the DA for criminal investigation. Then the real kicker, the beach club was shut down pending resolution of the boundary dispute. 2 weeks later, it wasn't just a legal fight anymore. It was a public spectacle. Local news picked it up. HOA demolishes Cottage builds club on owner's land. Homeowners flooded me with their own horror stories about Karen. The DA charged her and 2 board members with destruction of property, trespass, and fraud. Emails surfaced showing they'd purposefully misrepresented boundaries, targeted my cottage for removal, and hoped no one would notice. When we got back to court, the HOA had a new lawyer and Karen was nowhere in sight. The judge ruled that my original 5 acres stood and that the beach club was illegally built on my land. The HOA had 90 days to tear it down or pay up. Plus, I got full damages for the cottage, plus punitive damages over $1.2 million. That's justice, right? Well, here's the part that still surprises folks. The new HOA board came hat in hand, asking for a solution. I could have made them tear the club down, would have bankrupted the whole neighborhood, or sold it at a king's ransom. But standing there thinking of Grandpa, I remembered what he always said. You stand your ground, but you don't have to rub it in. So I leased them the land for $1 a year on 2 conditions. 1, make the beach club open to everyone, not just Shoreline Heights. 2, rename it for my grandfather the George Morrison Memorial Beach Club. The board was stunned. I built a new cottage this time with all the quirks and spirit of Grandpa's, just a little more up to date. A year later, I'm standing on my new deck, sun setting over the lake, beer in hand, Harold beside me. Kids splashing at the new beach club, my grandfather's name up on a sign. Harold grins, says, "You could have taken them for millions." I shake my head. Money wasn't the point. Justice was. And making sure nobody ever bullies another family out here again. We clinked bottles, and for the first time since that letter, I felt peace. The cottage was gone, but the legacy, that stubborn refusal to back down, that sense of fairness, was still standing. Funny thing about justice, it doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it's having the power to destroy and choosing instead to build something better. I lost my cottage, sure, but gained the knowledge that I stood up to power, honored my grandfather, and maybe changed a community for the better. But hey, here's what I keep coming back to. Where's the line between standing your ground and showing mercy? If you were me, would you have made the same call or gone scorched earth? Drop your thoughts down below. Tell me your own stories of fighting for what's right or when you think justice crossed the line into revenge. Because out here we all got our battles. What matters is how you finish them.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.